Hello, BookTube, and here's my book to film of Turn of the Screw by Henry James, published in 1898. It's a novella, so not a full-size novel. And The Innocents, uh, which was put out by 20th Century Fox in 1961, and directed by Jack Clayton, starring Deborah Carr. And I'm only going to be able to touch on a fraction of the story of the book and the film, because they are extremely complex, I would say. Now, Henry James wrote this as a ghost story, a Christmas ghost story. It's framed at the beginning by a group of people telling some stories, some ghost stories around Christmas time. And the one character says he's got a manuscript of a ghost story, and it's even like it's turning the screw even further because it's about children. And he wants to read the manuscript, so he gives a bit of preface for it that a young governess, 20 years old, is hired to take care of two orphan children by their uncle. And she's 20 years old, as to say, this is her first assignment. She's from a vicarage. She's very inexperienced in life, period. But she's in complete charge of the household and the children. The uncle wants her to deal with everything and never, come to him with any questions or anything, that she's supposed to deal with it. So, and she's clearly enamored by him. She's almost a Victorian style of romance and love that she feels before towards the uncle. So she takes the story and she goes to Bly House, and she expects it to be a gothic pile, dark and everything. But when she arrives, it's very bright, and like it's there's lots of light in there, and as well as the child. Like, she meets Flora, the first child that's there, with the housekeeper, Mrs. Gross. And the governess is never named in the book. She's just Miss, or the governess. And she finds that the Flora is angelic, a beautiful child, and she, all her thoughts of a gothic, dark gothic place is put aside. So but then shortly out, like she everything goes on okay. It's, she's doing her governess duties, and the Miles, the little brother, or the older brother, Miles, she's 8 years old, he's 10, 11, and he gets expelled from school, and he gets sent home. And a letter, well, she gets the letter from the uncle that's unopened from the headmaster. And the reason that she's there, basically, is the previous governess, Miss Jessel, had died within the past year. So the children, so she wants to sort of fill the place of Miss Jessel, because the children apparently were very close to her. And Miles comes home, and the letter actually doesn't quite say why he was expelled. And she it's a bit of a mystery. She thinks there's something going on, and she starts learning about Miss Jessel and Peter Quint, the valet, and that Miles was very close to him, but she sort of learns that he was quite crude, and that apparently, well, possibly, him and Miss Jessel had encounters, sexual encounters, but that's never ever explained in the story because it's left open. It's suggestive. So she starts, wondering why he's been expelled and wants the answer from him, and then starts thinking that both of them have been corrupted because she's inexperienced, and she thinks they're both been corrupted by Peter Quint and Miss Jessel, the previous governess. And it's like there's so many suggestive things, but it's never ever explained. And she sees somebody on top of the tower, a man that's not there, or at least not part of the whole household, I should say. And she describes him to Mrs. Gross, and she finds out that it's like it. She's described. Uh, she's described um, Peter Quint, and then later she sees him again through the window, looking in, but nobody's there. And she starts finding that the children are whispering a lot to each other, and sort of being a bit bad in many ways, and she just doesn't quite know what's going on, but she's convinced that there are spirits there are ghosts, that Quint and Miss Jessel are possessing or going to possess the children. And she sees Miss Jessel in the water in the lake, and she's convinced the children see them as well. But nobody, like, they never say that they've seen them. There's a lot of hints that she, or that the children know that they're there, but nobody else sees the ghost. Not even Mrs. Gross. Nobody else sees the ghost, but she is convinced that she's got to save their souls. She's got she's got to save the children. So she pushes them a little farther, and wants answers. And it turns out that she pushes Flora too far, and Flora starts screaming and starts screaming obscenities, apparently. But and then so she's convinced that that's where she's learned these things, and that Miles was talking at obscenities at school, and that's why he was expelled. So Mrs. Gross takes Flora away so she can be with Miles, and find out, like, get him to admit everything and admit that it's Peter Quinn, so she can sort of exorcise them or him. And but during this time, she thinks that Miles is very attractive and charming, like his uncle. And Miles acts like an adult at times, talks like an adult at times, and actually winds up kissing her as an adult. And she is at one time, it seems to be appalled, but there's an attraction she seems to have to the children in many ways, or at least it's suggested. And that's the beauty of this story. But anyway, she confronts Miles, and when Peter Quint shows up, he dies. Miles dies. He has a heart attack. And this is sort of where the story ends. And the owner of the manuscript got it from the governess, unnamed. There's no really details about it other than she came from a vicarage. And was written about 20 years ago, and she's now passed away. So, and like I say, it's there's so much ambiguity with it. It's not clear of what's happening. It's suggestive, but you have to make it up as a reader, because you can read it as it's all in her mind. She's made this all up. Nobody else sees the ghost. And it was and it's there's been tons of critical material written about the turn of the screw, and I guess it would happen to start around the 20s that the Freudian interpretation came, and it's in her mind. She's repressed sexually, and she is attracted to the children, especially Miles. But so she's repressed. She's attracted to the uncle, and she has no experience. So it's like she's got this romanticism and thinking that things are bad, but also repelled by it, but also attracted by these horrible things that she's conjuring up, or apparently may have happened to the children. But there's no evidence for any of this stuff, and like other than her mind, because the housekeeper, Miss Gross, sort of believes her to a certain extent, but then is not sure, because she thinks she's gone too far. But anyway, that's what the story is. So it's a lot. It's generated a lot of discussion over the century, well, more than a century, that it's been in print, or well, it's never been out of print, I don't think. And one of the biggest earliest essays was written by Edmund Wilson, called "The Ambiguity of Henry James," and he does talk about that. There's no evidence. Nobody else sees the ghosts. However, there is the criticism about his essay is, well, how if she's the only one that sees it, how does she accurately describe Peter Quint without knowing what he looks like? That's that's part of the ambiguity of it, and there's so many layers of this ambiguity that it's and I think Henry James, I think it was calculated. It must have been calculated that you really don't know, and you can read this story as a ghost story, and it's a real ghost story, and then you can read it as sort of repressed in the Freudian sense, because Henry James's brother was William James, and it's like he knew about the psychology, and I think he put all this stuff in there. So then fast forward to 1960, basically, and we've got Jack Clayton, the director, who had directed another film before this called The Room at the Top, and he's sort of been was touted as British, the best of British New Wave directors. He didn't quite want to be remembered as that, so he wanted to do something different. And he remembers reading Turn of the Screw when he was 10 years old, and it scared him, and he wanted to make this. But how do you turn this ambiguous story with so many layers that you cannot film that kind of material that's in the prose? Because Henry James' prose is very, very ornate. It's very verbose. It's maybe not for everyone, but I love it. And I especially love this one. So how do you turn that into a film? Well, he wanted to do it, and then he found out that William Archibald had written a play called The Innocents. So he thought, well, that's a great name. So he approached, 20th Century Fox to get to film this, and I think the budget was just about 450,000. Well, it was still quite a bit, and it was black and white film in CinemaScope, and he used um, what's it, Fred? Oh, I forget the cinematographer's name now. Freddie. Oh, let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, it should be. It should be in here. Um, but anyway, the cinematography and the lighting is just fabulous. So like once the script was done, then he was able to do it. Let's see here. Oh, of course I can't find his name. Uh, yeah, it's just typical, and it's gone off my mind. But anyway, if you look it up, you will see who the cinematographer was, uh, and it's just fabulous. But okay, so he gets William Archibald to write up a script for this. He wasn't happy with it, and so he first of all approached Harold Pinter, who said, "Don't use flashbacks, because if you use flashbacks and you see Miss Jessel and Quint, they will never believe it as a ghost, them as ghosts." Not quite sure of that, but he took that to heart. But they did have some flashbacks set up, and the way they were going to start the film was a funeral, and then go back, and it would have been Miles's funeral, and then tell the story, then fade to her being hired by the uncle in in Harley Street. They scrapped that right at the end. So anyway, so he didn't like this, so he brought in John Mortimer a little bit to sort of Victorianize it, and there was he brought in a lot of Victorian ideas for this. And then he still wasn't happy with everything, and he got Truman Capote to overhaul the script. That's Truman Capote of Breakfast at Tiffany's and In Cold Blood. And at that time, he was deep in writing In Cold Blood. But he took the time to do this. They had a relationship prior to this because Jack Clayton was the producer on John Huston's film Beat the Devil, and Truman Capote was writing the script as they were filming. So they had a relationship there. Anyway, so he revamps this, and he really sets up like the ambiguity and the darkness with the in the prose. He translates that to a film, to the cinema, to the screen, and he does that in a number of ways. Like there's all this beauty, but it's gothic. It's very gothic. The interiors are gothic, but there's also sort of the rot, the beauty. There's rot in the beauty. Whenever there's beauty, there's rot, and it's falling apart. So and they've given a name, Miss Giddings, to the governess, played by Deborah Carr. And when she goes into the first place, she touches some roses, and the roses petals fall down. So that's the beginning, and there's all sorts of that kind of thing, and also there's the girl's name is called Flora, and so there's a huge thing of flora of flowers throughout, and especially roses. And they start out, as I say, with the interview at Harley Street with the uncle, and the uncle is played by sorry, my brain, I have to keep referring to here, Michael Redgrave. And he's only in the beginning. He's very charming but cold, and she like Deborah Kerr's character falls in love with him. Mrs. Giddens. Sorry, I said Giddings. Giddens is the name they gave her, and that was from the play. So and then they set all this up, and they set up all these red herrings throughout. Again, um, Deborah Carr sees the ghost, but when she first sees Quint on the on the tower, she doesn't see his face is all fuzzy, like you can't really see anything, and and then later when she sees a little miniature painting of Quint, then when she sees him again, she sees him the way he is. So that gets around the story thing, or the story problem of how did the governess know what Peter Quint looked like. And there's all sorts of stuff like that in here where it changes. Then when she remembers again the scene on the tower, you can then now recognize it as Quint. But again, it's all shown from her point of view. Deborah Carr's character is in every scene pretty well, or actually probably is. She starts out wearing these dresses that are sort of light and bright, and then as it goes along, and even the brightness of the house and the outside turns to rain and darkness and decay more, and she starts wearing more black as it goes along, like she starts seeing Miss Jessel. And I guess I should just say here that the plot line of the novella and the movie are pretty well the same. There's a few changes, but it's in the sensibilities and how you get across this idea. And it was Truman Capote bringing in sort of Southern Gothic ideal, and little things like interesting lines, well, the one was from actually John Mortimer. Was Mrs. Gross was saying, rooms in the daytime used as dark woods. And that's a Victorian way of saying they're having sex. And that was Mrs. Jessel and Peter Quint. And it goes along that that Mrs. Giddens is certain after Miles comes back that he's been expelled for something, and most likely obscenities, she figures. And where did he learn these obscenities from? He's learned them from Quint. And she's convinced that their spirits are coming back to possess them. And there's the line as well in there that she wants to be, belonging and to possess and stuff, but in a different way. So there's double meanings of things. It's like when she's talking to Mrs. Gross about Miles, and she says, "Oh, well, yeah, you like a child with spirit." So it's a double meaning of things like this, and then she sort of is convinced this is what's happening, and she's up to a point convinced Mrs. Gross, but Mrs. Gross hasn't seen anything. She's sure the children have seen it and know what's going on because they're whispering, and she starts running things through her mind, dreaming and fantasizing about what is happening or what has happened in the past, and she's walking around the house, and beautiful lighting with a candelabra, and light being reflected off things, and just sort of as if it's fully lit by the candle. She's walking and she's hearing voices, and she's hearing, like, knock before you come in, and that's Peter Quint. So she's convinced, in her mind that shows that she's convinced that the children had seen them when they had their liaisons, and that they want to possess the children again. And Miles is sort of becoming a little more like she's convinced, like Peter Quint. And there is a point where Miles says, "Kiss me goodnight," or something like that, and he leans and gives her, yeah, like an adult kiss. She's shocked, and but also you could tell there's something a little more there. And it was controversial scene. 20th Century Fox wanted it taken out, and Jack Clayton wouldn't. And like there's so many things. It's very difficult to explain everything, and it's the lighting that's so great. It's in CinemaScope, and there's the way that they got deep focus was to have really bright lights, and so they get deep focus. So everybody in the background is as well. And there's a neat scene where Mrs. Gross is telling Miss Giddings how Quint had died out on the steps in the depth of winter, cold, icy, died with his eyes open, and that Miles found him. So you've got you've got Mrs. Gross sort of here at the front. You've got Wayne in the background, quite far in the background. Deborah Carr as Mrs. Giddens. And she sort of comes up like this and across, and the camera angle moves a little bit, so she's in front, and it's just a fabulous scene the way it's orchestrated. Anyway, I could go on about that, and it'd be nice to be able to show these scenes, but if you've seen the film, you'll know what I'm talking about. So, and then she is convinced because that they're being possessed, or they're going to be possessed, so she wants an exorcism, and she thinks that if she can get the children to admit that the Miss Jessel and Quint are there, then it will exorcise them, to admit, and for Miles to admit what happened at school. It's all hinges on that, from what happened at his school, that all this is coming out for her. And there's some other great things that after she confronts Flora, saying, "You can see Miss Jessel, admit it," and the child just starts screaming obscenities like in the story, and Mrs. Gross is there, and she said, later says, "I know what I saw." And then Mrs. Giddens is taking that oath that she has seen the ghost, but does she mean actually that she saw how she was badgering the child and causing the child almost like a breakdown for the way she's doing this? That's the one reading, and then the other reading is something else. And then she says, "Well, take Flora away. She wants to be alone with Miles to get to the bottom of this." And Mrs. Gross says, "Well, what do I tell the uncle?" And she says, "The truth." And then Mrs. Gross says, "The truth, okay." See, for Mrs. Giddens, the truth is that there's spirits there, and they're going to possess. But to Mrs. Gross, the truth is that Mrs. Giddens has caused all this. She has caused these problems with the child, and for Flora to start screaming and acting out, and it's all her fault. So there's again all these layers in the film, and I just love it. It's always been one of my favorite, and I think it is my favorite ghost story, but it may not be a ghost story. And that's how great. And then I had finally just read the Turn of the Screw. I should have read it a long time ago, because I want to reread this, and I want to read a lot more of the critical material that's associated with it. But also, as I was doing this, I read Christopher Failing's The Innocents. One of the BFI guides that was published in 2013. It is fabulous. He goes through all the permeations of the scripts. It tells who added what to it, and about the production. And it's one of the ones that are really good of the BFI guides. This is a fabulous one. The film has an introduction by Christopher Failing, and he does the commentary. And much of what he says in the commentary is in here, but there's a lot more in here than he says in the commentary. And it's just, and the way the film opens up too, it opens up like it doesn't have the fanfare from 20th Century Fox. It's just black, and Flora is singing a song that was created for it, and it sounds like a Victorian song. And then all of a sudden you get hands that come up from the side, as if in supplication and in prayer, and then a voiceover, and then you finally see Deborah Kerr's face, and you know there's lines from which are later in the film. So it's kind of weird, like what's happening. She says all she wanted to do was save the children, and then it ends, but it ends the exact same way. So it's like a circular thing. It's like, you know, it is gone back. It is telling, but you don't really know that till the end. You don't know what's happening. There's the sounds in the background. There's also silence, but there's also lots of nature sounds. Like I say, it's just, I'm not going to go too much more into it. I hope I haven't confused anybody. But there's just so much with this film that can be talked about, and so much with the story. So, and if you are interested in fabulous filmmaking, this is a film to see. Even if you're not, well, like I say, you can watch this as a ghost story. You can watch this as she's, you know, Freudian aspect, or something in between, that she is creating all this stuff by coming there, and she's the conduit for the spirits. It's so many ways that it can be read, and the book is exactly the same thing. So they did an excellent job translating it to the screen. So anyway, next week will be Exorcist. So take care, Book 2.